2,000 years ago, while Rome was building its empire across the ocean, something extraordinary was happening on the land we now call America. This isn't the story you learned in school. This is the story of the people who were already here, thriving in ways that would shock most modern Americans. The year is 10 AD. Emperor Augustus has just died in Rome. Jesus Christ is a teenager in Nazareth, and across an ocean that Europeans won't successfully cross for another 14 centuries. Millions of people are living lives of remarkable sophistication across the American continents. No, they didn't have steel or wheels or writing systems like the Old World, but what they had built was something entirely different, something adapted perfectly to this land. The morning sun rises over what will one day be called Ohio. Smoke drifts from hundreds of earthen mounds, some as tall as 6-story buildings. These aren't random piles of dirt. These are engineered structures that required moving millions of cubic feet of earth, all without modern tools. The people who built them understood geometry, astronomy, and social organization on a scale that would impress any civilization. But let's start where most stories don't. Let's start in the frozen north. Along the northern coasts of what will become Alaska and Canada, the Dorset people are doing something that seems impossible. They're thriving in one of the harshest environments on Earth. When temperatures drop to 40 below zero, when the sun disappears for months, when every resource must be hunted or gathered from ice and frozen tundra, these people don't just survive. They create art, they tell stories, they laugh and love and dream. A Dorset hunter stands motionless on the ice, his body wrapped in layers of seal and caribou skin, sewn with remarkable precision using bone needles and sinew thread. He's been waiting for 3 hours, watching a breathing hole in the ice. His harpoon, carved from walrus ivory, with a toggle head design that won't pull free once it strikes, rests perfectly balanced in his hands. This isn't primitive technology. This is engineering refined over thousands of years. When the seal surfaces, the hunter's strike is instant and perfect. Within seconds, he's pulling 100 pounds of seal onto the ice. This animal will feed his family for weeks. Its blubber will fuel their lamps through the dark winter. Its skin will become waterproof boots and bags. Its intestines will be transformed into translucent windows for their semi-underground houses. Nothing is wasted because nothing can be wasted. But here's what most people don't know. These Arctic peoples were creating sophisticated art during this period. Small ivory carvings of bears, birds, and human figures, each one unique, each one showing incredible attention to detail. Why? Because humans don't just survive. We create beauty even in the harshest conditions. That's what makes us human. Now shift your perspective 1,500 miles south to the Sonoran Desert, where temperatures can reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The Hohokam people are performing what seems like magic. They're farming in the desert. By 10 AD, the Hohokam have already been developing their canal systems for decades, but they're about to enter their golden age. Over the next few centuries, they'll build more than 500 miles of canals, some of them 30 feet wide and 10 feet deep, all dug by hand, using stone and wooden tools. These aren't simple ditches. These are engineered waterways with precise gradients that move water from the Salt and Gila rivers to fields miles away. A Hohokam engineer stands at the headgate of a major canal as the spring floods arrive. He's calculated the exact moment to open the gates, using knowledge passed down through generations and refined through careful observation. Open too soon, and the violent floodwaters will destroy the canal walls. Too late, and the fields won't get the water they need for planting. He reads the river like you read a book, understanding every ripple and current. The water flows into the canals, and within hours, it's spreading across hundreds of acres of fields where corn, beans, squash, cotton, and tobacco are growing. The Hohokam have created an oasis in the desert, supporting thousands of people in permanent villages. They're playing a ball game on courts similar to those found in Mesoamerica, suggesting trade and cultural exchange across vast distances. They're making etched shell jewelry using acid derived from fermented cactus fruit, a technique so advanced that European scientists won't discover acid etching independently until the 16th century. Think about that for a moment. While Romans were building aqueducts with concrete and slave labor, the Hohokam were building irrigation systems using nothing but human cooperation, stone tools, and intimate knowledge of their environment. Different approaches, equally impressive results. But perhaps the most mind-blowing civilizations of this period were centered in the river valleys of what we now call the Midwest and Southeast. The Hopewell culture was at its absolute peak between 100 BC and 500 AD, meaning our period from 10 to 20 AD catches them at the height of their power and influence. Imagine standing in what will one day be southern Ohio. You're surrounded by geometric earthworks, circles, squares, and octagons connected by perfectly straight walls of earth that run for miles. These aren't random structures. Many of them align with astronomical events, solstices, equinoxes, and lunar cycles. The Hopewell people were tracking the heavens with precision, encoding their knowledge into the landscape itself. The largest Hopewell earthwork, the Newark earthworks, covers more than 4 square miles. It includes a perfect circle measuring 1,200 feet in diameter, connected by parallel walls to an octagon of similar size. The precision is remarkable. The walls are straight, within inches, over distances of hundreds of feet. How did they do it without surveying equipment? We still don't fully understand. But here's where it gets interesting. The Hopewell weren't building these monuments for kings or emperors. They had no centralized government, no cities in the traditional sense, no standing armies. Instead, they created something unique, a vast trading network based on shared spiritual practices and voluntary cooperation. A Hopewell trader in 15 AD might carry obsidian from Yellowstone, copper from Lake Superior, shells from the Gulf Coast, mica from the Appalachian Mountains, and alligator teeth from Florida. These materials traveled thousands of miles, passing through dozens of communities, all without a monetary system or written contracts. The trade was maintained through relationships, spiritual obligations, and mutual benefit. Now travel west to the Pacific coast. Here, in the temperate rainforests of what will become Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia, entirely different cultures are thriving. The coastal peoples of this era, ancestors of groups like the Salish, Maka, and Chinook, have developed what anthropologists call an abundance economy. The salmon runs here are so massive that a single river might see millions of fish returning to spawn each year. Add in the shellfish beds, the sea mammals, the deer and elk in the forests, the edible plants, and you have an environment so rich that people don't need agriculture. They've developed sophisticated food storage and preservation techniques instead. A coastal woman in 15 AD sits in her cedar plank house, working on a basket. But this isn't just any basket. It's woven so tightly it can hold water. The geometric patterns aren't random decoration. They tell stories, mark family lineages, and encode information about proper techniques. This basket might take 3 months to complete, and it will last for generations. Her husband and brothers are at sea in a dugout canoe, not a small one, but a vessel 40 feet long that was carved from a single cedar tree. They're hunting gray whales, animals that can weigh 30 tons and measure 50 feet long. This isn't desperation. This is sophisticated maritime culture. They have specialized equipment, trained techniques, spiritual practices, and social structures, all built around this dangerous but rewarding harvest. The abundance of the Pacific Northwest allowed these cultures to develop in unique ways. They created some of the most complex non-agricultural societies in human history. They had social hierarchies, specialized craftspeople, long-distance trade, monumental art, and complex spiritual practices, all without farming. In the Four Corners region, where Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico meet, the basket-maker peoples are in a transitional period during 10 to 20 AD. They're the ancestors of the Pueblones, who will later build the famous cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon. Right now, they're perfecting dry farming techniques and creating some of the finest baskets ever made anywhere in the world. A basket-maker family tends their cornfields in a high desert valley. The corn they're growing looks nothing like modern corn. It's an ancient variety adapted specifically to this environment, with deep roots that can find moisture far underground and kernels designed to withstand drying and storage for years if needed. But agriculture here is risky. Droughts can last for years. So the basket makers maintain a mixed economy. They farm when conditions are good, but they also hunt, gather wild plants, and store food obsessively. Their storage baskets are engineering marvels, woven so tightly that even tiny seeds can't escape, and treated with pine pitch to keep out insects. They're also beginning to experiment with pit houses, semi-underground dwellings that stay cool in summer and warm in winter. These aren't simple holes in the ground. They have ventilation shafts, central fire pits, deflector stones to control airflow, and sophisticated roofing structures. Over the next few centuries, these will evolve into the multi-story pueblos that will amaze Spanish explorers. The Great Plains in 10 to 20 AD are home to numerous groups who are perfecting the art of bison hunting without horses, which won't arrive for another 1,500 years. These peoples hunt on foot, using techniques that require incredible knowledge, patience, and coordination. A hunting party approaches a bison herd in late fall. They've been watching this herd for days, learning its patterns, waiting for the right moment. Bison are massive animals, unpredictable and dangerous. A bull can weigh 2,000 pounds and run 35 miles per hour. You can't just charge in with spears and hope for the best. Instead, these hunters use a technique called the buffalo jump. They've identified a cliff near the herd's grazing area. Over several days, they've built small stone cairns that form a funnel leading toward the cliff. Now, with perfect timing, they position themselves behind and around the herd. Using calls, movements, and sometimes just their presence, they encourage the herd to move toward the funnel. The operation requires split-second timing. Move too fast, and the herd will scatter. Too slow, and they'll stop before reaching the cliff. But these hunters have been training for this their entire lives. Their fathers taught them. Their grandfathers taught their fathers. going back countless generations. When it works, dozens of bison go over the cliff. The fall doesn't kill all of them, so hunters at the bottom finish the job with spears and otlots. Then the real work begins. The entire community moves to the kill site. They'll spend weeks processing these animals, taking literally everything: meat for food, hides for clothing and shelter, bones for tools, sinew for thread and bowstring, hooves for glue, horns for containers, stomachs for water bags, and even the dung for fuel. This isn't wasteful mass slaughter. These communities take exactly what they need, and they use every single part of what they take. The efficiency would impress any modern sustainability expert. Here's something that challenges our assumptions about human societies. Most of the peoples we're discussing had no centralized governments, no kings, no standing armies, no police forces, and no written legal codes. Yet they maintained social order, organized massive construction projects, conducted long-distance trade, and resolved disputes. How? Through kinship systems more complex than any modern bureaucracy, through councils where respected elders made decisions by consensus, through spiritual leaders who maintained sacred knowledge, through gift-giving traditions that created webs of obligation and reciprocity, through storytelling that encoded laws and proper behavior in memorable narratives. A Hopewell community in 15 AD faces a crisis. Their main ceremonial mound has been damaged by flooding. Repairing it will require thousands of hours of labor. There's no king to order people to work, no tax system to pay them, no coercive force to compel participation. Instead, the spiritual leaders call a gathering. They tell stories about the ancestors who built the mound, about the spiritual significance of maintaining it, about the obligations each person has to the community and to future generations. They describe the feast that will follow the completion of the work, the ceremonies that will bind everyone together. People volunteer, not because they have to, but because not volunteering would shame them and their families. Social pressure, group identity, and spiritual belief accomplish what other societies need police and armies to achieve. This is sophisticated social technology, every bit as impressive as any pyramid or aqueduct. One of the most profound differences between ancient American cultures and European ones was the relationship to the land itself. Europeans tended to see land as property to be owned, resources to be extracted. Ancient Americans saw land as alive, as sacred, as something you belonged to, rather than something that belonged to you. Every mountain, river, forest, and valley had stories. These weren't just pretty tales. They were sophisticated systems for encoding practical information and ethical guidelines in memorable narrative form. A story about how Coyote, the trickster, stole fire might actually encode information about where lightning is likely to strike and how to start fires in different conditions. A story about a sacred mountain where spirits dwell might encode the observation that particular peak affects local weather patterns. Stories about proper behavior toward animals might encode sustainable hunting practices developed over millennia. The Hopewell earthworks weren't just monuments. They were calendars, maps, and spiritual spaces all at once. Standing inside the Newark earthworks during a particular lunar alignment, experiencing how the moonlight falls through specific openings, isn't just observing astronomy. It's experiencing the cosmos as sacred and interconnected. This worldview led to conservation practices that maintained ecosystem health for thousands of years. Controlled burning, to manage forests, careful harvesting that never depleted resources, sacred groves and seasons where hunting or gathering was forbidden. These weren't modern environmental regulations. They were spiritual obligations that happened to preserve biodiversity and ecosystem health. By 10 to 20 AD, trade networks stretch from the Arctic Ocean to the Gulf of Mexico, from the Pacific to the Atlantic. Materials and ideas flow along these routes, creating a continental economy without currency, writing, or centralized control. A shell from the Gulf Coast might travel 3,000 miles over several years, passing through dozens of hands, accumulating spiritual significance with each exchange, until it finally becomes part of a burial offering in a Hopewell mound in Ohio. Nobody owns it in the modern sense during its journey. Each person who holds it has obligations to it and through it to others. Obsidian from the Yellowstone region spreads in all directions. Copper from Lake Superior travels south and east. Turquoise from the southwest moves north. These aren't just raw materials. They're connections, relationships made physical. The trade is sustained through gatherings, pilgrimages, and ceremonial exchanges. A group might travel 100 miles to participate in a ceremony at a sacred site, bringing gifts from their region and returning with gifts from others. No one tracks who gets exactly equal value. The relationships matter more than the transactions. Ancient Americans developed extensive practical knowledge about their environments through careful observation over countless generations. This was science, even if it didn't use the methods or terminology of modern science. The Hohokam knew exactly when to plant crops based on weather patterns, soil conditions, and astronomical observations. Their success rate was probably higher than modern farmers who rely on weather forecasts and agricultural extensions services. The Arctic peoples understood animal behavior, ice conditions, and weather signs in ways that kept them alive in environments that kill modern people with advanced equipment in days or hours. The peoples of the eastern woodlands had encyclopedic knowledge of plant medicines. They could treat infections, reduce inflammation, ease pain, induce vomiting when needed, stop diarrhea, and address dozens of other conditions using plants whose efficacy is now confirmed by modern pharmacology. As 20 AD arrives, the peoples we've been following have no idea what the next 2,000 years will bring. The Hopewell culture will flourish for another 5 centuries before transforming into something else. The Hohokam will expand their canal systems even further before mysterious changes cause them to abandon their cities around 1450 AD. The Dorset will eventually be displaced by Thule peoples, ancestors of modern Inuit. The basket makers will develop into the ancestral Pueblones, building cliff dwellings and great houses. Around 700 to 900 AD, one of the largest cities in the world will rise at Cahokia, near modern St. Louis. At its peak, it will have a population larger than London at the same time. The Mississippian culture will spread across the southeast, building temple mounds and creating complex chiefdoms, but that's centuries away. In 15 AD, these peoples are simply living their lives, raising their children, honoring their ancestors, maintaining their traditions, and slowly, continuously adapting and innovating.